I was completely convinced I was going crazy, staring at the faded, brittle pages in my hands, wondering if the man I called my grandfather, the quiet, gentle man who taught me how to fish, was actually a spy. I mean, what else was I supposed to think when I found a diary hidden inside the lining of his old military uniform, written in a strange, almost illegible cipher, mixed with sketches of things that looked suspiciously like surveillance equipment from the 1940s. It was a bombshell, a complete and utter rewrite of my family history, and it all started with a simple attic clean out after his funeral. My world had just shattered into a million pieces, and I had no one to ask. Was I wrong to dig into a past that was clearly meant to be forgotten, even if it meant uncovering wisdom that could change my life? Let me take you back to the beginning, before the funeral, before the attic, before the diary. Grandpa Thomas, or the General, as my dad affectionately called him, was the bedrock of our family. He wasn't a general in rank. He was a decorated army medic who served in World War II and Korea. But he carried himself with an aura of quiet authority and immense calm. He retired from the service and opened a small, successful carpentry shop, trading the muddy trenches for the scent of sawdust and oil. He never talked about the wars, never. If a movie came on with gunfire, he'd simply change the channel. If someone asked about his medals, he'd just say, "They're just brass, son. The real treasure is right here." And he'd tap his chest over his heart. This silence was, in retrospect, the loudest thing about him. I adored him. He was the one who taught me patience when I couldn't tie my shoe, the one who told me the best way to handle a bully was to stand tall and never let them see you flinch. He was my hero, plain and simple. Then came the inevitable day, about 6 months ago. Grandpa passed away peacefully in his sleep at 98. It was a gentle end to a long, full life, but it still left a hole in our family the size of the Pacific. A few weeks after the service, my dad and I started the heartbreaking task of sorting through his belongings. My grandmother had passed years prior, so it was just his stuff left behind. We got to the attic, a place I hadn't been since I was a kid, and it smelled of old paper, dust, and something faintly metallic. In a dark, forgotten corner, tucked under a pile of moth-eaten blankets, was his old military footlocker. It was heavy olive drab green and locked with a small, tarnished brass padlock. My dad had the key. Inside, the first thing we saw was his uniform. The jacket was perfectly pressed, the ribbons and medals still pinned to the breast, preserved in plastic. As I carefully lifted the jacket out, a seam on the inside of the left lapel caught my eye. It looked wrong, like it had been stitched up recently, not by a professional tailor, but by someone in a hurry, with slightly uneven thread. Curiosity, the terrible kind that never lets a secret lie, got the better of me. I found a seam ripper in a nearby sewing basket, and, with a nod from my dad, who was distracted by a box of old photographs, I started gently pulling the threads. What I found was a pocket, a secret compartment expertly sewn into the lining, and inside that pocket was a small, leather-bound notebook. Not a regular one, but the kind they sell at military surplus stores, sturdy, compact, and designed to withstand the elements. It was the diary. My hands were shaking as I pulled it out. The pages weren't dated chronologically. They were divided into sections, titled simply with Roman numerals. The handwriting was unmistakable, Grandpa Thomas's meticulous script, but instead of the familiar stories or notes he used to leave on the fridge, these pages were filled with strange symbols. Some were recognizable letters, but most were a mix of geometric shapes, dots, and lines, a cipher, a secret language. Mixed in with the cipher were beautifully rendered, detailed sketches of locations that I recognized from his old photos, places in Belgium, France, and a particularly chilling one of a bomb bridge, but there were also drawings of what looked like radio schematics, small cameras hidden in cigarette packs, and detailed escape routes marked on maps that had no city names, only grid coordinates. The title of the very first section was what stopped my breath: On the Art of Disappearing. My dad saw the look on my face. "What is it, kiddo?" he asked, walking over. I showed him the notebook. His face went pale, a mixture of shock and confusion mirroring my own. I have no idea what this is," he stammered. "He was a medic. He patched up the wounded. That's what he did. He never mentioned anything like this." We spent the next week consumed by it. We didn't talk about it with anyone else, not even my mother or aunt. It felt too big, too sacred, and honestly, too ridiculous to be true. A war hero turned spy. It was like something out of a bad movie, but the diary was real. I took photos of the entire thing, spent hours online researching famous ciphers, and finally, after countless dead ends, I found a possible lead in an obscure forum about Cold War cryptography, a system used briefly by a covert intelligence unit attached to a forward operating medical battalion during World War II, a unit specifically designed to gather intelligence behind enemy lines under the guise of medical neutrality, a cover. My grandpa's entire service was a cover. I managed to crack the first few pages using the reference key I found. The key was frustratingly incomplete, but those first entries were enough to validate my theory. The diary wasn't just a record of dates. It was a collection of philosophical musings, observations on human nature under duress, and, most importantly, a series of principles he called the 7 Pillars of Tactical Wisdom. It wasn't about spying anymore. It was about life, viewed through the extreme lens of combat and espionage. The entries were deep, profound, and utterly transformative. Pillar I was the power of the blank slate, the ability to shed all assumptions and see a situation as it truly is, unclouded by fear or ego. Pillar Roman 4 was the necessary retreat, knowing when to walk away from a fight, not out of cowardice, but as a tactical maneuver to conserve resources for a future, more winnable battle. I was applying these principles to my own life, to my career struggles, to the petty office politics I was trying to navigate, and suddenly everything was clearer. I was seeing the world through his trained eyes. The man who taught me how to whittle wood had also written the ultimate manual on living a strategic life. But the truth of his past still felt like a betrayal of his silence. He had lived a life of deliberate anonymity, and I was about to violate that by reading his innermost thoughts, translated from a secret code he likely never expected anyone to break. So that's the situation I was in. I had in my hands a legacy of forgotten wisdom, a guide on how to be calm in the face of chaos, all while wrestling with the monumental, terrifying truth that my grandfather was someone completely different from the man I thought I knew. I had this incredible tool, a blueprint for a life lived with intention and tactical peace, but to fully unlock it, I had to keep digging into a past that he had fought so hard to bury. It felt like trespassing on sacred ground. Before I tell you what I did next, how I found the rest of the key, and what the final, shocking entries revealed, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have stopped, respecting his secrecy and his final resting place, or would you have pressed on to absorb every single piece of wisdom he had left behind, no matter the personal cost to his memory? Seriously, tell me what you would have done. I couldn't stop. I simply couldn't. The desire to know the man behind the medic, the strategist behind the carpenter, was too strong. The partial key had only given me the introductory thoughts, the philosophical framework. The real meat of the diary, the actual war-time accounts, and the full list of the 7 pillars was still locked away. I realized that the cipher wasn't completely randomized. There was a pattern. Each character was systematically shifted based on a variable, and I was certain that the variable was hidden in plain sight, something he would have seen every day, something he loved. I thought about the carpentry shop, his tools, his favorite books, his fishing lures, nothing. Then, one evening, staring at the spine of the diary, I noticed something etched so faintly into the leather, almost invisible. It was a single, tiny sequence of numbers, 4-5-8. I recognized the sequence instantly. It was the first 3 digits of his favorite Bible verse, the one he always quoted when I was worried about an outcome, Philippians 4:8. The verse about focusing on what is true, noble, right, pure, lovely, admirable, excellent, or praiseworthy. His full code wasn't just $4, $8. It was the exact numerical value of all the letters in the entire verse, which he used as his rolling key. It was brilliant, it was deeply personal, and it unlocked the rest of his story. The remaining pages of the diary were devastating, but also immensely clarifying. He wasn't just gathering intelligence. He was doing it to save lives, operating undercover to identify command centers and troop movements that, if bombed, would cost thousands of civilian lives. His disappearance wasn't a tactical retreat from life. It was an oath. He writes about the sheer psychological weight of having to hold 2 identities at once: the medic who saved lives and the covert operator who chose who could be saved. The climax of the diary, the entry marked Pillar Roman 7, the cost of peace, described a moment during the Battle of the Bulge where he had to choose between revealing his identity to save a captured comrade or maintaining his cover, which was essential for a mission that would ultimately save an entire hospital from an artillery strike. He chose the mission. The cost was his friend's life, a burden he carried until his dying day. His silence wasn't about shame. It was a profound, strategic peace, a conscious effort to live the rest of his life fully in the world he had fought to preserve, without the shadow of the one he had to inhabit. The forgotten wisdom was this: life demands impossible choices, and the only path to true peace is to make the necessary choice and then, crucially, to keep living. He taught me that the highest form of courage isn't the one-time act of heroism, but the daily, quiet courage of continuing to be a good person after you've seen the worst of humanity. The aftermath of reading the diary was a quiet revolution within my own soul. I didn't expose his past. I didn't tell anyone outside of my immediate family what I found. I realized that the secret wasn't meant to be told *. It was meant to be understood *. The wisdom was the inheritance, not the story. I took Pillar VI, the value of the unobvious flank. Always look for the path that no one else is watching, the solution that is not the most direct but the most effective, and applied it to my stagnant career. Instead of confronting my difficult boss directly, I started building a relationship with his superior, focusing on quiet, undeniable results. Within a year, I was offered a promotion to a different department, a flank move that no one saw coming, especially not my old boss. Grandpa's forgotten wartime wisdom didn't teach me how to fight a war. It taught me how to win at life by living strategically, quietly, and with profound integrity. I still have the diary, tucked away, and I reread his maxims whenever I face a major decision. I am a different, better, and infinitely calmer person because of it. The general won his last, greatest battle, not on the field, but in my heart, decades later. That's the entire mess, the whole truth about the military grandfather I thought I knew. He gave me a secret that wasn't a family scandal, but a family legacy, written in code and secured with a prayer. I hope that sharing his story, his principles, helps one of you navigate a chaotic moment in your life. Remember, sometimes the deepest wisdom is found in the quiet places and the deliberate silences. It makes me wonder about all the other secrets our loved ones take to the grave, and the lessons we miss because we never bothered to look for the secret stitch in the lining. Like this video, if you were on my side in cracking the code and believe his wisdom should be shared. Subscribe for more stories like this where I dive into the strangest, most compelling narratives from the Reddit archives, and share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section. What did you learn from the general? I'll see you all in the next story.